What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Space Arena Ground Arena, where we cover Star Wars Unlimited from the ground up into space. I'm BananaCrapshoot, and today I'm doing a video on some new leaders and new decks that you can play early in the Set 3 meta to win with early. So, got a couple decks we'll go through, talk about them, and yeah, hopefully you get a jump on your local scene with these. So, the first one we're going to look at is a Mono Rex ramp deck. So Captain Rex action on his front side is okay. What we are really looking for is his ability to work with clones. This deck is all about ramping out the clones and leveraging some of the really good command cards. So his front side, he is an action. It costs 2 resources and you exhaust him. And if a friendly unit attacked this phase, you can create a clone token. That is relevant sometimes if you have the 2 extra resources laying around. But really, his deployed side, when deployed, he creates a clone trooper token, and each other friendly trooper gets +1 health. That's where he really shines. That means his attack power is low at 2, his 6 health is good, and he buffs all your other troopers. So that includes a lot of the stuff we have in the deck. So the 30-second stalwart is the first card in here. It's a 1/2, it's a 1 cost unit, it's cheap, and has coordinate. And all coordinate, it gets +1/+1. It's a trooper. Battlefield Marine is a trooper. Everyone knows that's a good card. Since this is mono green, we can have Lauren, so we can get some healing out of him. Playing the 2-drop Echo, the new one. It's a 2/2/2 that gets +2/+2 with coordinate. It's also a trooper. Phase 1 clone trooper, 2 cost 3/2. And then the Republic Commando is a 3 cost 2/5, and then it has Saboteur with coordinate. And we'll talk about it, but we have enough token generators and between Rex and Shock T and drop in and manufactured soldiers and Rex's ability to create clone tokens, we should have no issue getting the coordinate online and no issue flooding the board. This is going for straight token flood. I call it a ramp, but the only ramp card that's in here is command. But you want to hit the ramp with the command. You could put resupply in here if you wanted, maybe over attack pattern delta, but I found that attack pattern delta is actually pretty solid in here with the amount of units and how wide we can go, that we can get some good value out of attack pattern delta. The Sundari Peacekeeper is another trooper that works with Rex, so he becomes a 1/6 with raid 2 and restore 2. Shock T is really good. She's the MVP. She can be ECL'd in, so she gives all your tokens +1 attack power. So when Rex is deployed and Shock T is out, all your tokens are +1/+1. And on attack, she creates a token. So you ECL her in, and you get a token. And a lot of times I can turn on, when you do that, it turns on coordinate. We're running Ayla in here as well. She's the 5 cost 6/5 Force Republic unit, and then she has coordinate on attack. She can prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to her for this attack. So she can, if you have 3 units out, she doesn't take combat damage back. Then we got Cody in here, the 5-drop 4/4 with overwhelm, and then with coordinate he gives every other unit +1/+1 and overwhelm. And in the games I've played with it so far, when he goes really wide and he gets that +1/+1 and overwhelm going with Rex and all the clones and stuff, you can really overwhelm. This is a straight token rush deck, and Cody really helps that. And then the leader Rex, when played, creates 2 clone trooper tokens. So we got Rex making tokens with his front side ability. On deployed, he's making tokens. We got Shock T making tokens. We got manufactured soldiers making tokens and drop-in making tokens. And then we're getting buffs from all of our tokens with Shock T, the leader Rex, and the commander Cody. So there's a lot of synergy here with the troopers and the tokens and going wide and flooding our opponent. Only running 3 space units here. The Pelta Supply Frigate. It's a 5-drop 3/6, and then it has coordinate. When played, create a clone token. So it's another way we can create tokens. You could probably, if you find yourself struggling against space, switch up. Maybe drop Ayla. I don't think Ayla is necessarily needed. She's just nice to have. You could drop Ayla for another ship. For the event package, we're running 3 Synchronized Strike. That's the new 2-cost event that you can deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the number of units you control in its arena. So we're really flooding ground arena with lots of tokens and units. So Synchronized Strike can hit pretty hard and wipe out some stuff. You get a lot of value out of it most times. Attack Power and Dowda for 3, you can buff 3 units. There's a lot of tokens, a lot of units, a lot of stuff you can buff with this. 3 copies of Manufactured Soldiers, so we can get even more tokens. 3 copies of Command, this one, buff, resource, return units, or so we can use it as a damage event too. But it's pretty clutch to buff some stuff with Command in the right situation. And then 3 copies of Drop In to create clone tokens. Like I said, this one, all about getting bunch of tokens out fast, and really Shock T's the main energy conversion lab target, but Ayla, Cody, and Rex, like, they can all be ECL targets, but Shock T's the main one. So that's the set 3 Rex deck. Next up is a Anakin with the new arena. So this is an aggro deck, and it's very heavily skewed towards space, so we'll go through the units first like we did with the other one. But Anakin, just talked about him. I think he's a pretty good aggro leader, but it's a little different because it's not like Sabine where he's actively dealing damage to base, or Leia where you're getting extra attacks in. But what he does is he is your end game. He is your closer. A lot of times he's like a 6-7 with Overwhelm, and he can close the game out for you on his deploy. But we're going to lean very heavily into space here and just overwhelm with a ridiculous amount of space units. We do have 14 ground units in here though. First one is a new one, Soldier of the 501st. It's a 1-cost 1/3 with raid 1. We're staying very low to the ground, very cheap, and very heavy space. Oh, and the arena, the new yellow arena. No, I can never pronounce this right. I'm going to butcher this. Petranaki arena. So he gets +1 attack power. So getting him to close the game out is not hard when he's hitting as hard as he is. So 3 copies of the 501st. That's a 1-cost 1/3 with raid 1. Then we got 2 copies of Spec Force Soldier 2/2 that can get around Sentinels. 3 copies of Cassian because we can smuggle him in for a ready unit. The Jesse, 3-cost 4/4 with raid 1. And then when played, he does create 2 battle droid tokens for our opponent, but we don't really care about that because we're not really worried about trading with units. We're worried about ruthless aggression here. So we're just trying to hit as hard and as much as possible and getting a 4/4 on 3 with raid 1, so he swings for 5. It's very strong. 3 copies of K2, everyone knows how great he is. And then space, we were running 24 space units, so 3 copies of the Cartel Turncoat, 1-cost 2/3 with a bounty draw card. We don't care about the bounty on it. We're worried about the 1-cost doing 2 damage. 3 copies of Wolfpack Escort, so 1-drop 2/1. When played, you may return a friendly non-leader, non-vehicle unit to its owner's hand. So a lot of times I'm gonna hit the Spec Force Soldier with this so that I can keep replaying the Sentinel stuff to keep removing Sentinels if it's problematic. 3 copies of the Alliance X-Wing, 3 copies of Anakin's Interceptor. It's a 2-cost 2/3, and then while your base has 15 more damage on it, it gets +2 attack power, so it's hitting for 4/3 late game. Green Squadron A-Wing, 3 copies of the Falcon, 3 copies of Red 3 to buff all our heroic units by giving them raid 1, 3 copies of Wing Leader because we have a bunch of Rebel stuff here we can buff. We can buff K2, we can buff Cassian, we can buff the Spec Force Soldier, we can buff the Alliance X-Wing, we can buff the Green Squadron A-Wing, we can buff Red 3, so we have some good targets to buff with the Wing Leader. And then we're running 12 events, we're running 3 copies of Political Pressure. Either way, I'm good with whatever they give us. They give us 2 other weenies we can attack with, or they're getting rid of something out of their hand. 3 copies of Bold Resistance, each is with the 3 units that each share a trait, and each of those units gets +2 attack power for the bases. Units. We have a bunch of units in here that have synergy with their traits. We got Rebels, we got some Republic in here, so we got Troopers, so we got stuff we can use to buff. And you can choose up to 3 units, right? So they get max value out of it. You want 3, but you can use it at 2 and still get good value out of it. you're getting 4 damage for 3. That's an open fire. So if you get 3 and you're getting 6 more damage for 3, then that's better than open fire. That was the way I was looking at it. Now, 3 copies of 4 Cause. Everyone knows this is a great aggro card. And all of our cards except for, I think, Political Pressure and Waylay are heroic. So we have a really good chance to hit, and it helps you fix your deck. So then 3 copies of Waylay to remove some other problematic things that we might see. I feel like I skipped over Anakin a little bit, but his front side, for an action, you can deal 2 damage to your base, and when you do, you get to attack with a unit. Now, if it's attacking another unit, it gets +2 attack power. That's not really relevant. Most of the time, we're not looking to trade units. But what that does do is it sets us up late game to close, because then when he flips and he's a 4/7, but he's a 5/7 with our base, and then he gets +1 for every 5 damage. If you have 10 damage on your base, right, that's +2 damage. So then he's at 5/7, so he's a 7/7 with Overwhelm. And then if you get to 15 damage on your base, then he's an 8/7 with Overwhelm. And then his Interceptor is also hitting for 4, so that's 12 damage between him and his Interceptor on the late game to close. So ideally, we're swarming the board with cheap units, really heavy into space, because it's harder to remove space units most of the time. And then closing the game with Anakin when he deploys, because he's going to be like a 7/7 or an 8/7 with Overwhelm. So you Spec Force soldiers and bounce them with full pack escort to replay them again and again to get around Sentinel units. But that is the set 3 Anakin space aggro. It's a lot of fun. Next up, we have Grogu's Baby Daddy, set 3 Yoda yellow deck. I'm running it with Jedha City because this deck is not an aggressive deck, and it's not a swarmy deck. It's more of a slower mid-range control deck-ish type deal. So running Jedha City to nerf a unit for a phase. So Yoda's frontside ability has an action. If a unit left play this phase, so left play. So anytime Boba would trigger, Yoda triggers. You draw a card, and then you can put a card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck. So it allows you to filter, fix your hand, and set up its deploy turn later. The Yoda deck will go through the units again like we've been doing. 2 copies of the 3/32 Stalwart. It's just a cheap 1-drop unit. This could be something else probably, but I like having at least a couple 1-drops. 3 copies of Grogu. I think Grogu is probably the most undervalued and underplayed unit through set 2. I know he's only a 0/5, but the action to exhaust enemy units and keep units on ice all game is really strong. So we got 3 copies of him in here because this is a slower deck, so we want to slow down the aggressive opponents early. So Grogu allows us to do that. 3 copies of the new R2 because he lets you discard a card from your hand and then search the top 3 cards of your deck for a card, any card. So it helps us fix our hand if we need to and go through our deck faster, and works well with Yoda's ability to look at the top card of your deck. 3 copies of Ezra. Ezra's just a really solid unit. Has been since set 1. So 2 copies of Ezra, 2 copies of Yoda. The 3-drop with a Restore 2 lets us draw 2 copies of Kanan, 2 copies of Chewie, because I think he's still undervalued as a 3/6 Sentinel on 5 that can get ready when he's attacked. 2 copies of Plo Koon, new unit, 3/6 with ambush, and with coordinate can be possibly a 6/6 on ambush on turn 5, which is really strong. 2 copies of Sentinel Obi-Wan, 3 copies of Luke, and 2 copies of the 8-drop Chewbacca that defeats a unit when it's played. In space, we're running 3 copies of the Ark, we're running 2 Concord Dawn Interceptors, and 2 copies of Redemption. For the event package, we got 2 copies of Mystic Reflection between Grogu, Yoda, Ezra, Kanan, Plo Koon, Obi-Wan, Luke, and Yoda Leader. We have a bunch of Force units, and most of the time this is -2, -2 for 1, so this is really good to use against TIE Interceptors, the Phantom, Lurking TIE Phantoms, and other units with 2 health. That's a great way to get rid of them for 2. 3 copies of Political Pressure. We talked about this in another deck, but make somebody pull a card, and if they don't, then we get 2 Battle Droid tokens. 2 Sparks of Rebellion, tear apart the hand. 2 copies of Takedown, 3 copies of Vigilance. We're paying 6 for this here. but the healing and the defeat, everything on this card is relevant. So it's really good here with Yoda. 2 copies of Rival's Fall, and then for upgrades, I'm running 1 Devotion and 1 Electro Staff main deck, and then 2 Jedi Lightsabers. We have a bunch of Force units, so that works really well. And then the sideboard, this one I have a sideboard for because I've been messing with it more. Another Devotion, another Lightsaber, 2 copies of Kira. She can be really strong utility. 2 copies of Razor Crest if we need some more healing and some more space presence. 2 Vanquish and 2 Evacuate. So Evacuate triggers Yoda here, and it can help reset the board if we can't handle it before the Yoda deploys. So then when Yoda deploys, he has Restore 2 and he's a 4/9, and when he deploys, you discard a card from your deck. And if you do, you defeat an enemy non-leader unit that costs the same or the less than the discarded cards you use for Yoda's front side or Ezra on attack to set up his deploy to defeat another unit. So we want to go slower, we want to stall early. We have a bunch of ways to do that between Grogu, and Grogu will let us stall, and then we have a bunch of healing between the Restored Arc and the Yoda unit and the Kanan unit, and then we got Vigilance healing, Redemption can heal, Luke can heal, Yoda leader heals, and then between the Concord Dawn Interceptors, Chewbacca and Obi-Wan, we have decent Sentinel that we can stall and dirtle kind of early until we get going, and then in that mid to late game really come on strong with strong units like Luke and Chewbacca, and then Yoda leader himself is also pretty strong when he's deployed. So that's the Grogu's Baby Daddy deck. I know Handlebar in my local play group, he's been a big fan of that deck also. Next up, we got what I'm calling Flip Cup Palp. Since Yellow Palp to Mono Yellow, Chancellor Palpatine, and since he's flipping back and forth all the time, just Palp Flip Cup seemed appropriate. So this one is a little harder. He's definitely a fun leader. I think he's a higher skill cap than some of the other leaders because you really have to sequence properly. If you don't, you're going to jack it up and get destroyed. One thing that is a drawback is not getting that extra unit on deploy, but his utility of healing 2, drawing, and dealing 2 damage, like flipping back and forth, that can make up for it, but you have to really sequence and deck build well with him. I think he will really reward really good sequencing and deck building. I'm running him with Jeddah City again because I like being able to tell you, no, you can't swing for 4 into my face this turn. So his front side starts face up on Chancellor, and then he has an action, you exhaust him, and if a friendly heroic unit was defeated this phase, you draw a card and heal 2 damage from your base, and you flip him. And when he flips to Darth Sidious, and that has an action, exhaust him. If you played a villainy card this phase, you create a Clone Trooper token, deal 2 damage to each enemy base, so in Twin Suns or multiplayer that's damaging everyone else, and then you flip him. So on his heroic side, he heals and draws you a card, and then on his villainous side, he deals 2 damage and creates a Clone Trooper token. So for ground units, we have 3 copies of the Phase 1 Clone Trooper. It's the 2 cost 3/2. 3 copies of Separatist Commando. That's the villainy 2/3. And then if you control another Separatist unit, that gets raid 2, so it could be a 4/3 for 2. 2 copies of Battle Droid Escort. That's the 3 cost 1/1 that when played and when defeated creates a Trooper token. 3 copies of the Phase 2 Clone Trooper, that's the 3/2 with Ambush. That one on turn 2, I've been finding is usually the card that's getting me my first heal and flip with Chancellor Palpatine. Is like on 1 I'll play like a Phase 1 Clone Trooper, and then on turn 2 I'll play a Phase 3, or on turn 1 I'll play a Phase 1 Clone Trooper, and then on turn 2 I'll play a Phase 2 Clone Trooper with Ambush, remove whatever unit they played, and then that lets me hit my first Chancellor a flip. 2 copies of Kira, heroic card, you know what it does, it's a solid utility card. 3 copies of Rush Clovis, I think he's really good, letting us generate tokens. 2 copies of Chewbacca, the 3/6 Sentinel. We all know 2 copies of Plo Koon because we are going to generate some tokens in this deck, so his coordinate with Ambush and Raid 3 will be relevant. And then I got 2 copies of Cad Bane Hostage Taker. as a villainous card. I just think this is like a crazy bomb that can, with some good utility, to remove units from the board. And then Cad being the 7/7, he's not, an easy thing to remove. So 2 copies of him and 2 copies of the new Infest Nest. That's the 5/7 Saboteur. I'm going to play it on attacking return an enemy non-linear unit with less power than this to its owner's hand. So some soft removal as well. For space, we're running 3 copies of the Soulless one, customized for Grievous. So 1/2, and on attack you can exhaust a droid unit or Grievous. If you do, it gets +2 for the attack, so it can be a 3/2. 3 copies of the Wolfpack Escorts, the 2 1-for-1, and you can bounce a friendly non-leader unit to its owner's hand. So the main target that I've been finding for this with this deck is the Battle Droid Escort. So that's the 3 costs. We can play it, create the token, and then we can bounce it back and play it again later to create another token later. 3 copies of the Lurking Tie, 2 Geonosis Patrol Fire. This one's for Tenderloin Vader Snatch out there. He loves this card. He's putting it in every deck, but it's 5 cost, 3/2 with exploit 2, so we can pay 1 for this by blowing up 2 things. And when played, has some removal. We can remove a unit that costs 3 or less to its owner's hand. So got some utility, and it's a 3/2 potentially for 1. For the events, we got 15 of them. We got 3 copies of Political Pressure. I just think it's a great card. 2 copies of Droid Deployment, 2 copies of Private Manufacturing. I think this card's crazy. It allows us to draw and filter. I just think it's a great card. 3 copies of Cunning, because we're mono yellow, so you gotta have Cunning. This is a great card. Everyone knows it. Still an amazing card. 2 copies of Drop In. It's the heroic token generator, and 3 on the doorstep. So we got a way to create tokens and ready them. So we have a pretty good split of heroic and villainous cards. We have a pretty good split for how we definitely have more heroic cards, because I think there's maybe a couple more heroic units. And that's because we need those heroic units, friendly heroic units, to be defeated to flip. So we got to be playing those heroic units to flip. We just got to play the villainous card, but we got to get heroic units on the board to be defeated to get the flip. For the villainous side, you just have to play a card. It could be an event. So it's easier to trigger Sidious than it is Palpatine, so that's why I have a little bit more heroic units than villainous units in here. But yeah, generally, like I said, I'm looking for that Phase 1 Clone Trooper turn 1 into a Phase 2 Clone Trooper on turn 2, and then so I can flip. And then really you just got to sequence and play smart. So you can play your villainy card, like I like playing like a Droid Deployment, or like an on the doorstep to trigger Sidious, and then flip back. And then so it's hard to explain. You gotta go test with it and mess with it and learn when and where and why and how you're flipping back and forth. But I think mono yellow is a lot of fun with him, and it gives us a good amount of units and synergy and utility between the two. So that's where I'm at with this one. Next up is, I think this is the last one. This is by far my favorite new deck for set 3 that I've been messing with. So this is a set 3 Asajj event focused aggro. This deck can be super fast. It's very different from other aggro decks we've had so far, but it's super fast. It can be a lot of fun, and we're running I have 29 events in here in the main deck, 3 upgrades, and then 18 units. So for the units, we got 3 Greedo, 3 Doctor Evanzin, 3 Battle Droid Escorts, 3 Fifth Brother, 3 Rush Clovis, and 3 Darth Maul Revenge at Last. Yeah, so we'll talk about Asajj, I guess. So Asajj is front side action. You exhaust her and you can attack with a unit. If you played an event this phase, it gets +1 for this attack. The thing that separates this from other leaders that buff units on attack is they all say, like, when attacking another unit, right? Like Anakin from set 3, when he buffs a unit, it gets +2 damage when attacking another unit. Asajj gets +1 power when you're attacking the base just for playing an event, and we have plenty of events. So we can buff our units to push extra damage in early and often. Now, when she deploys, she is only a 3/4, so she's very squishy, but she deploys on force. So the same turn as Sabine, she's deploying, but she is super squishy. So you gotta, be smart when you deploy her. But she's a 3/4, and her on attack is, if you've played an event this phase, she gets +1 for the attack, and then she gets first strike also. So you can, if you need to trade some units, most of the time you're going to be going face, so, or base. And then I'm running a 30 health base. I was trying Tarkin Town. I did try the one that draws you a card, and neither of them, but I felt like the extra health was way more relevant when I'm trying to race damage. So that's why we're running the 30 health base. So I feel like the ground unit package is pretty self-explanatory. Greedo and Advanza are both 3/3s. The Battle Droid Escort gives us like 3/3 stats for 3, and it gives us extra bodies. And the token units do synergize with some of the events we'll talk about. Fifth Brother is just really solid unit, and he's amazing with a lightsaber. Rush Clovis, attacking for 5, he's a 5/5, and then on attack he's creating battle droids. And then Maul is, the 5/6 that can attack 2 units instead of 1. He's also disgusting with a lightsaber. So for the events, since we have a good amount of Force units that we can play early, 3 copies of Force Lightning, some utility, and we can push damage if we need to. It's also 1 cost, so it's a cheap event we can play to trigger a SAGA. And 3 copies of Force Throw, same thing, Force units. This one I play more often than Force Lightning, because ripping cards from hand has been more valuable, but same thing, it's a 1 cost event. 3 copies of Droid Deployment. I love this on turn 1. Play this for 2. Create 2 battle droid tokens. It doesn't always have to be. This is also really good on turn 2, because we can play this to get the buff to attack with like a Greedo, so then a Greedo can hit for 4, or the Doctor can hit for 4. But if you don't get Greedo or Evanzin in your opening hand, this is a decent turn 1 play to at least get some board presence. 3 copies of Force Choke, another Force unit, so most of the time or another Force event, so most of the time we're paying 1 for this. 2 copies of Keep Fighting. Everything but Maul can be targeted by Keep Fighting, so including Asajj, so we can ready her. We can ready any of our other things to attack again, and it's a cheap 2 cost event. 3 copies of Private Manufacturing. I think that event is correct, and it only costs 2. Let's just see more cards. 3 copies of Self-Destruct, so it's a 2 cost event. Defeat a friendly unit. If you do, you can deal 4 damage to a unit. So after you swing with the battle droid for 1 and ping a shield off something, or after you hit base, you can play Self-Destruct. Delete that token unit to defeat that Kanan or that Yoda that keeps healing on the damage you're doing. 3 copies of Surprise Strike, pushing more damage in its event. So we can get like +4 out of this if we play it right. 3 copies of Waylay and 3 copies of On the Doorstep. So I like On the Doorstep in here. Any yellow villainy deck, I really like On the Doorstep on for right now, because for 4 it gives us 3 units. Gives us 3 damage that turn, and 3 health and 3 bodies. So it turns on Coordinate by itself, and it lets us exploit. Then for upgrades, 3 copies of Fallen Lightsaber, and in the sideboard we have 2 copies of Daring Raid, 2 copies of the Hotshot Blaster, 2 copies of Power Failure, 2 Fang Fighters, and 2 Lurking TIE Phantoms. Now, the other unit, there's another unit that I've been testing with, and it's gone in and out, in and out, in and out, has been the Asajj unit itself, that you can play on turn 1 sometimes if you combo it. So the Asajj is a 4 cost, and she's been going in and out as I've been testing different unit combinations. So right now I have Darth Maul in over her, but it might end up being the Asajj unit again here soon. So that's another one to keep on your mind, Asajj unit. But she's a 4 cost unit that has exploit 2, so you can pay 1 or free. She's free if you. So I'll explain the combo here, but she's a 2/4, and on attack, if you attack with another Separatist unit, it gets +3, so it becomes a 5/4. And if you played an event earlier, you can buff her with the leader. She can be a 5/4. 6/4, and with the lightsaber, sky's the limit, right? So the way droid deployment on turn 1, you can droid deployment turn 1, and then exploit them to play this 4-drop Asajj on turn 1. That's a pretty strong combo, but it's not super consistent. So that's why I've been testing them all, because the combo isn't super consistent. There's been some times where it's been really funky to play her because you don't always get the Separatist that early, so you don't always get the buff that early. But she is good, and getting her in turn one is really good, but it hasn't been super reliable for me, so that's why I've been testing the Maul instead of her recently. And so far I've been really liking Maul to help close the game with the Asajj leader, especially if Asajj leader gets taken out. Maul can help close the game better than Asajj can, in my opinion, and mainly that has to do with his 6 health. So that is the set 3 Asajj event aggro. This deck is super fun. It can be super fast. So go play with it and have some fun. I'm pretty sure that's the last deck I had ready. So those are the set 3 decks that you can go out and win with early in the set 3 meta for Star Wars Unlimited. So thanks for hanging out, and we will see you in the arenas.